Hey guys, Brad from simpleguitar.com here, and welcome back to another video for the Total Beginner series of videos. Today we are going to be talking about how to read scale diagrams for beginners. Now, if you haven't already seen the how to read chord diagrams video, I'm going to suggest that you go check that out first, and I will link to that right up here at the top of the video. And so go watch that video first before you watch this one. It'll make life easier. But if you've already seen that, or you're brave and you just want to dive in, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about how to read scale diagrams. So first of all, what is a scale diagram? Well, much like guitar tablature or standard music notation or a chord diagram, scale diagrams are a way that we communicate how to play something on guitar. It's a communication medium. Okay, and it's very similar to what we do with our chord diagrams. So let's dive in and take a look at it. So just like a chord diagram, this is what a scale diagram looks like. It is a grid of vertical and horizontal lines where your vertical lines represent the strings of your guitar. So the line all the way on the right is the first string of your guitar, the skinniest one, your high E string. And then you have your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, and your sixth string all the way on the left. Whenever you see something placed on one of these vertical lines, whatever line it's on is which string you're going to be playing. And the horizontal lines on a scale diagram are also the frets, just like on a chord diagram. So here we have a dot with a number 1 inside of it on the scale diagram. Now the number 1 in the dot is which finger on your fretting hand you're going to use. In this case, it's your first finger or your index finger. And the position of the dot, so what vertical line it's on, which in this case is on the 6th string, and then what fret it's over, which horizontal line, which in this case is the 2nd fret, this is where you're going to put your finger. So you're going to take your first finger and put it on your 6th string on your 2nd fret, and it'll sound like that when you play it. Okay, so pretty straightforward, especially if you've already seen the chord diagram video, because it's pretty much the same thing. Just like with your chord diagrams, the position of the dots is where your finger goes, and the number is which finger to use. Now, the difference with a chord diagram and a scale diagram is typically in a chord diagram, most of the time, the thick black line at the top of the diagram is the nut of your guitar. And on a scale diagram, that can be the case, but isn't always. Most of the time, you're going to see these reference fret numbers off to the side of the diagram, and that is going to tell you which fret you're going to be starting on. The reason for that is because your scales, more often than chords, are going to be all over the fretboard. And so in this case, where there's a number 5 next to that first dot, instead of it being the 2nd fret, that means that I'm going to play that at my 5th fret, like this. And it'll sound like that. Now, this is what the rest of the scale looks like. Now, most of the time when people starting out playing guitar see these kind of scale diagrams, it's kind of an overwhelming thing because that's a lot of notes. Where the heck do you even start with that? I mean, there's 2 notes on every single string, and what order am I supposed to do, and how do I do this right? So today we're going to remove that mystery and make it easy for you to understand, because scale diagrams are actually pretty simple, but they look kind of daunting at first. So the first thing is that when you're looking at a scale diagram, you have to understand that you're going to start on the lowest note on the lowest string. And then we're going to play this one note at a time. Okay, so we're going to find the lowest note on the lowest string. So the lowest string here is your 6th string, and the lowest note is that one on your 5th fret with your first finger. Okay, so we're going to play that first note on the 5th fret, first finger, 6th string. Most of the time, you're going to be starting with your first finger. We will look at an example where you don't start with your first finger. Most of the time, though, you're pretty safe if you start with your first finger. Now, once you play that lowest note, you're going to move to the next highest note on that string. So in this case, since we are playing 2 notes on each string for this scale, you're going to play that 5th fret on your 6th string with your first finger like this. And then the next note is the 4th finger playing the 8th fret, 1, 2, 3 frets higher from your 5th fret. And so you're going to use your pinky to do that, okay? And you don't have to hold down your first finger anymore. You can let that one relax, okay? So just your pinky is down. If you really want to, like if using your pinky is really hard right now, you could use your 3rd finger, There are some guys who will play these scales with just their first and third, and that's fine. It's up to you, really. I just do this out of convenience, and also because most beginner guitar players don't give their pinky enough attention. And so if you start giving your pinky a little bit of attention and training it, it will be good to you in the future. Anyway, so here's that second note on the 8th fret. Okay, so I started with my lowest note on the 6th string, and then I played the next note on that string. And now I've gone through all the notes on that string. So I'm going to move to the next string, which is my 5th string, and I'm going to start with the lowest note on that string. So this is going to be the 5th fret on my 5th string with my first finger. And then I'm going to continue going to the next note on that string, which is the 3rd finger playing the 7th fret on the 5th string. And then that pattern continues, and I'm going to go to the 4th string and play the lowest note. And then the next note, which is the 7th fret. And then the 3rd string. So I'm going through playing the lowest note and then the highest note on each of these strings, and you just take it one note at a time. Okay, I know that when we look at our chord diagrams, we're looking at everything kind of all at once and then thinking about playing all of it at once. With your scale diagram, you start with your lowest note and you move through it note by note. Now, when you get to the top of the scale, you're going to reverse it and you're going to come back down. So I'm going to start at the highest note on the highest string, so the highest note on my first string, and then I'm going to go backwards and play the lowest note, and then change strings and start at the highest note on my second string, and then go to the lower note, and then change strings and do the highest note on my third string, and then down, and then the highest note on my 4th string, and then the lowest note, and then the highest note on my 5th string. I'm just walking all the way down through the scale, one note at a time. Okay. Now, if we go through all of this at once, I'm going to hit go on this so that you'll see what it looks like, and I'll play along with it so that you can see as it goes. Okay, now let's look at how it looks to reverse it. So remember, when you're playing back down the scale, you start on the highest note and then go to the lowest note on that string and then go to the next string, start at the highest note. So it's just the reverse of everything, and you go one note at a time through the whole scale. And starting from the top, it'll sound like this. All right, that principle is going to apply pretty much to any scale diagram that you see. But let's look at a quick example where you don't start with your first finger. This is an example where I'm starting on my 8th fret, because I have that 8 reference note. And then I'm going to start on the lowest note, which in this case is the 8th fret on my 6th string, and I'm going to use my 2nd finger. Now, the trick with this is on the very next string. When I go to my 5th string, I've got notes that are on lower frets than I started on. So like I said, normally you would start with your first finger. But in this case, because there are lower frets, it makes sense to start with my 2nd finger instead. But like I said, you could just play through this. You can use your 1st and 3rd finger for all of it. But for the sake of practicality and to get a little bit more practice using all 4 of your fingers on your fretting hand, I do like to do it with all 4. That way you can get used to using your pinky. But it's up to you. Do whatever you want. Do both. Do it with all 4 fingers and then go through and do it with just your 1st and 3rd, So this is what it'll look like playing this from the top, starting with my 2nd finger on the 8th fret, and then I'm going to use my 1st finger on the 7th fret, and this is how that'll sound. And then coming back down, it'll sound like this. Okay, so that is pretty much how it looks when you have a scale that you don't start with your 1st finger. Although if you really want to, you can. It's up to you. There's really no hard and fast rule as far as fingering goes. You do want to be efficient with your fingering, but really it boils down to what you are comfortable doing. So let's look at another example of something that you're going to see in scale diagrams. And this is something that confuses a lot of students the first time they see it. Now on the left side here, this is the scale that we did first, where this is your typical minor pentatonic box pattern that most guitar players will start out with. And it's really, really common, okay? Sometimes people will get confused, though, once we move that into a position where we use open strings. Because since this is a scale, the cool thing about scales on the guitar is you can play them at any fret, and your fingering, the pattern that you play, like the spacing between the notes of the frets, what fingers you use, that can all stay the same no matter where you play it on the fretboard. But when we move it down to the bottom of the neck and we're using open strings, sometimes that confuses people, but it works exactly the same way. So when you see this, you're going to start with your low E string being the open string. That's your lowest note. And then you're going to use your second finger on the third fret of your sixth string. And then when we move to the next string, your open A string is the lowest note, so you don't need any fingers. So you just play that open. And then you use your first finger to play the second fret. And then the fourth string open, which is your lowest note, on the next string. And then your first finger on the second fret. And then your third string open is the lowest note of the next string. And then your first finger on the second fret. Then your second string open is the lowest note on your second string. And then your second finger on the third fret. And then your first string open is the lowest note on your first string. And your second finger on the third fret for that one. And then coming down, it's just the reverse. You start at the highest note and go one note down to open. And then second string, highest note. And then lowest note. And then your third string, highest note. Then open. Then your fourth string, highest note. And then open. Fifth string, highest note. And then open. And then your sixth string, highest note. And then open. Just walking through one bit at a time. So I'm going to show you the animation of this too, so that you can see what it looks like. Going up, it's going to sound like this. And then coming back down. Okay. Now, this is another scale that you can look at. And I wanted to show you this because on top of seeing the scales that are shown at different fret numbers and they use open strings, one of the other cool things about these scale diagrams is that they will take up more space, more frets than just a chord diagram. So this is an example of a 3-note per string scale, and this is a major scale. But this works the exact same way. It's just there are more notes to it. You're playing 3 notes on every string. And so this diagram has to cover more frets. And so this is just an example for you to be able to see that. But this works just like anything else. Now, you do want to notice there is a reference fret number off to the left, which is your 8th fret. So we're going to start this on the 8th fret on your 6th string. And you're going to use your first finger for that note. And so let's go through the animation of how this would sound so that you can watch how you would read this scale diagram. So going down, it'll go like this. Okay, so this is just an example of these different scales. And I just wanted you to be able to see a bigger scale. I don't expect you, especially if you're just starting out, I don't expect you to be able to just jump in and play a 3-note per string major scale like this. It's not something that I usually start people out with, but I want you to be aware of it so that when you do see this, it's not overwhelming or confusing. You can go, oh, that's just a scale diagram, and it follows the same principles as every other scale diagram. So here is the review for you really quick. Let's go through this and make sure that you understand all of this. If you have any questions, do leave a comment below the video and I will get to you and help you out. So remember, the scale diagram is basically the same as a chord diagram. It's a grid of vertical and horizontal lines. Your vertical lines represent the strings on your guitar, with your first string being all the way on the right, and then your second string, third string, fourth string, fifth string, and sixth string as you go to the left. And your horizontal lines represent the frets on your guitar. When you see a dot on the grid, what vertical line it's on and what horizontal line it's over, the position of that dot is where your finger goes, and the number is which finger you're going to use. And just to note, sometimes you'll see those numbers inside the dots like this, sometimes they're outside the dots, and sometimes they don't even tell you which fingers to use, and you have to guess. But I like you guys, so I put numbers in the dots to make it nice and clear. So in this case, you're going to use your first finger, your fourth finger, and your third finger. Another thing that you may see, just so that you're aware of this, is sometimes people will put the scale degree in there too. And so that's not the finger that you're going to use. They're using more music theory, but you don't need to understand that to do it when you're starting out, okay? Now, remember, when you do this, you start on the lowest note on the lowest string, and normally you're going to start with your first finger, and then you're going to move to the next highest note on that string, and when you've gone through all the notes on that string, move to the lowest note on the next string, and then continue going up through all the strings, and then reverse that to come back down through all the strings. So when you're playing back down the scale, you go from the highest sounding note down to the lowest note, and you start at the highest note on the first string or the highest string in that scale, and then go down to the next lowest note on that string. And when you've gone through all the notes on that string, go to the next lowest string and continue that way through all of the strings. And just a reminder, when you see an open circle above a string, that means you're going to play that string open, but it's the same order that you normally would follow. So if you see an open string, that's the lowest note that you're going to play on that string. Obviously, you can't play lower than that, but you play it in the same order that you would whether you're going up the scale or coming down the scale. So I hope that that helps you out, guys. I mean, these scale diagrams, when you first see them, they can be a little bit freaky, but really it's not that difficult as long as you remember that you start on the lowest note and you go one note at a time. You go up that string, then you go to the next string, go one note at a time, then you go to the next string. If you can break it down and go through that, I remember the first time that I looked at these scale diagrams when I was starting out and teaching myself, I was a little bit terrified. I bought, these scale books that everybody says to get, and I opened it up and it was all Greek. I couldn't tell what to do because it's just all these dots on a scale diagram. So I hope that that really makes it so that when you see these scale diagrams, you know what's going on and you can read it and you can understand it, and you can always come back and watch this again. The more that you watch it, the more that you're going to understand, and it's going to make more sense. And so that's an option for you. You can always come back and watch this again. And like I said, if you have questions still, do leave a comment below the video and I'd be happy to help you out and answer any questions that you've got. Now with that, guys, I do have a free gift for you available at my website. It's called the Top 10 Things to Learn on Guitar First. It is a free guide. It's like 17 pages of stuff that I like to teach students as soon as I can when they're starting out playing guitar. And there are some scales in that guide. In fact, the scales that I like to start students out with, I call that instant rock star scales, and they are so easy. And you can be playing through them and sounding cool with them really quick. They're awesome scales, and they're pretty simple. And so those scales are actually in that guide because I like to get students doing those pretty quick. So go get that guide at simpleguitar.com/top10. I will put a link down in the comments below. And good luck with reading your scale diagrams. I hope that that helps you guys out. And thanks again for liking and subscribing to the video and helping spread the word. I appreciate it. And I will catch you guys in the next video.